Cyberpunk 2077 is here. The initial writing of the factions I thought was pretty promising. The nomad, the corporate, the street person, I thought was pretty cool. Gives it a bit of a different feel. This is something we've seen in a lot of RPGs. But during the game, when they do mention, you're from the nomads, or you have no clan, I'm sure that if I would have picked the corporate one, they would have said the exact same dialogue, just maybe switched out nomad for corpo. But while playing the game, it felt really good, felt impactful, so thumbs up for that. The initial confrontations, however, with the mechanic and the sheriff started feeling a little bit...
The corps pay you and have you on a leash like a dog, you know that?
A little bit cheesy. I see what they're going for. They're trying to set this tone of like the sheriff is this authority, the mechanic is somebody just trying to get by in the world, and in both cases your character has to sort of push through them. And you are making a few choices along the way. Sometimes the choices feel like just sort of color, dialogue things. Other times you have to really exhaust every option, and there were a few times in the dialogue when I was playing where I didn't want to choose any of the options. But you had to pick one anyway. Didn't really seem to matter. And then later on, the dialogue gets really interesting, where there's some serious questions to you from some characters asking you to betray somebody, where I really felt like I was making a choice, and I felt like I was having an impact on the story, and that actually felt pretty exciting. When you step out into this world, first of all, it was really shocking that it was first person after spending about a half an hour, 45 minutes something on my character creation. Made this really hot girl, nice kind of dark caramel skin, purple gradient hair. You know, it's interesting. Usually I pick the female voiced characters because a lot of the guys in games, they kind of sound like this, even though I like when Adam Jensen talks like that. But for some reason, the girl in this game, she kind of sounds like what I find most guys sound like in games.
I'm V.
I'm V.
I'm V. I'm V. I'm going to see if later on if I can switch that back to a male voice and see how that one is. So far, she's been fine. Starting out in the desert reminded me of Final Fantasy 15, where you're in a desert. And I think Final Fantasy 15 had such a great pacing to the beginning of the game. 4 dudes in a car, getting to know each other, the banter, you're pushing a car, you're listening to a great song, and you're in a desert. And when you finally see this small settlement of a little gas station, and Cindy's gigantic tits, and angry old Sid, it feels like a nice progression. And then you get to like the convenience store, and then you get to a resort. So I think this game does a pretty good job of giving you a desert setting, very small towns, a little bit of flavor. You see some sort of like loud NPCs practicing boxing around the corner, and...
Light on your toes there. Forward and back. Boxing is doing the thinking with your feet. And thrash, bam, bam.
The way some of the NPCs sort of yell and are really boisterous and jumpy and colorful, and the way that the advertisements on the TV are really like this kind of campy satire of a future, to me really feels very Grand Theft Auto, where it's more of like a satire as opposed to the dark seriousness of, say, a Deus Ex. So it's definitely on a different spectrum, which I think is good, because Cyberpunk, even though it isn't totally explored a lot in video games, even though it seems like such a great match, there are a lot of tropes that are really, really well worn ever since Neuromancer came out in Blade Runner, that we've seen a lot of these cities all look exactly the same and feel the same. And while this is still using a lot of that 80s neon, they're sort of combining it with like 90s extremism, really loud colors, and then an idea of what the future could look like. I noticed some of the NPCs' lips don't move when they talk. I figured maybe they would iron that out. I'm obviously playing the version with the big 40 gigabyte day one patch. In terms of bugs, I didn't see too many. There were a few things where it seemed like cars had collided. You heard the noise, you saw a lot of things move around, but I didn't see a car. I saw a couple motorbikes just fly off. Sometimes the character faces don't load in, the textures don't load in. They sort of look like they're like a blurry mess as they're walking up, and then they kind of morph into what they are. And I had the game crash once. But overall, after about like 4 or 5 hours of it, I haven't had anything that has been game-breaking, other than one moment where I was supposed to go grab a gun from the first person. It's like one of the very first quests, and it felt like he was supposed to say something to me. I saw some lines of dialogue I thought were his, but he wasn't talking. It turns out I just needed to go into his store and find the one gun that was priced at 0 eddies and pick that one. When you meet your friend and go through the border smuggling mission, this is where it felt very tonally shaky. I was never really sure who is in danger and why, who's in charge of this. What is this guy, the old pro, and we're joining in? Are we both pros? They say some lines of dialogue that make them seem like the seasoned, hardened veteran criminals. And then other times, all of a sudden, the big guy's really scared. Oh, what are we gonna do?
Of course I do. But the fixer didn't give you the job deeds?
He did. I was just making sure.
You, sure you've moved contraband before?
Why, are you nervous?
Well, maybe a little. Hey, border crossing up ahead. What now?
And he forgets that they have a credit chip for a bribe.
Yeah. Forgot about that.
Are they setting something up for later? Maybe. But there was a lot of that seesaw of, are they hardened criminals? Are they scared babes in the woods? Both can be interesting, but it was really hard to know which feeling to feel. And then when they come up on the border, and all of a sudden you have these papers that say...
It's marked LOA. Perfect.
What's that mean?
Lost on arrival. Means the cargo was flagged as to be lost as soon as it crossed the border.
Oh, so they know we're smuggling.
Well, they're about to find out.
It's a corrupt place. You go and you take care of all that, you leave, and then all of a sudden, bam! Exciting car chase sequence, you're shooting out the window. All these moments individually are pretty exciting, and I think tell a lot about the world. Just the way it was put together was really tough for me to feel the stakes and the danger.
What happened in there?
I'll tell you soon. We need to get out of here.
Yeah, okay.
Well, his demeanor totally changed on that second line.
Let's say I have a bad feeling about this.
Why? Oh, and then all of a sudden this guy's like, I don't even have the money to pay you.
I ain't gonna lie. I'm a bit light. Can't pay you now. Actually, I wasn't gonna pay you at all. I was just gonna bust ass and disappear as soon as we crossed over. But you're all right.
Wait, he was going to pay you? What about the fixer? Okay, so he's sort of the middleman, or he's like subcontracted you out?
You tricked me.
Oh, well, apologies for offending the spotless moral code of a smuggler.
So what's next?
Okay, so you're going to trust this guy? Or are they going to use that as a thing of this guy's untrustworthy, he wasn't going to pay you? Is he going to backstab you later on or have a heart of gold turning moment? But no, he just says really, in a really friendly way, I wasn't going to pay you, but I like you. Let's be best friends now. And then they cut to this crazy montage.
But you can only be a major league player for so long. The faster you live, the faster you burn out. If you don't get a bullet to the brain first.
Where it's like a trailer. It's a game trailer in the bloody game. I don't think I've ever seen that, especially that early in a game. I mean, I've seen some games, Last of Us and some Naughty Dog games and some other story-based games with these montages, but it's more like something that happens in the middle when you want to show a passage of time, or later on in the game when you're doing like flashbacks and stuff. But to start off with that, it does two things that are a bit strange. Number one, the first time you see Night City as a player, your character has already done 6 months of work through this montage that you're just seeing glimpses of. So there isn't that like big hit first. I think that would have been kind of nice to at least see it and then they go to the montage. But that's kind of nitpicking. To work in this kind of situation, this underground, to work with these fixers, you need to have a lot of contacts. It would take a lot of time because it's all underground. They're doing illegal activities. They don't just let anybody come up the street. You'd have to start off with a lot of lowbrow missions, just beating people up, bodyguarding, petty stuff. And I think they show all that with the montage. It's sort of like a Goodfellas moment. So I like the idea of the montage. It was a little bit shocking and off-putting that I didn't get to experience Night City for the first time with them, but now that I kind of reflect back on it, I think that it does work pretty well. And I applaud them for trying something unique and flashy and cinematic in that way. That is a pretty interesting storytelling device. The combat. The combat is very, very RPG heavy. Your enemies take a long time to die, and you die really quickly. Kind of makes me feel like I'm playing Morrowind. This leaves a lot of room for upgrades of your weapons, of your attributes, of your perks. And it makes me think I need to specialize in something because, I mean, you can shoot an enemy in the head 4 times. You'll see the headshot indicator come up and up, up and up and up. And what I like is that they have the DPS for all the different weapons. And you see that the melee weapons are actually doing like triple the DPS. And when I think about it, there's probably a lot of games where a gun may take like 10 shots, or maybe 3 or 4, and melee might just take 1. But to see it kind of written down, seeing that number higher, I'm into numbers. I like RPGs, I like strategy games, so that really works for me. And I will say that even though the combat can feel spongy and drawn out, most of the combat encounters have felt pretty difficult and overall pretty exciting, even when they are drawn out. The first little side mission you do where you're taking on a gang, I found worked really, really well. The cyberware.
You peruse and choose while I scan. See what's going on inside.
In Deus Ex, especially Human Revolution, Invisible War, the cyberware and the perks you would get, they can actually change the way you would play. Where you could take somebody down with no hits. You just go up behind them, you press the takedown button, or even just close enough to them. You upgrade that so you can take down 2. So I use this example a lot. You can approach 3 enemies in a room, they don't know you're there. You can headshot one of them, sprint towards a 2, hit the 2 takedown before they've had a chance to sound the alarm. You've taken out 3 guys. I think it feels pretty badass. I think it works with the character. I think it's really fun to plan those events, maybe throw a smoke grenade or grenade or something, then take them out. Now you can take out 4. There's perks you can get where you're jumping off a rooftop and you're landing with no damage, or you can upgrade that so now you're knocking the guys down around you. So it's like different ways to play. Will the cyberware allow you to do that? I'm not really sure on that yet, because so far they've only given us the 2 upgrades. Everything else is quite expensive, so we're going to spend a lot of time upgrading attributes and skills and getting money before we are going to do any cyberware. There's also a bottleneck where you need to upgrade your CPU and stuff, like pretty standard stuff for cyberware and augmentations. But I'll be interested to see. I have to explore that more to see if it's actually going to change the way you play, or if it's just going to raise all the damage numbers. Whoa. Where the game really shines, like Blade Runner, like Neuromancer, is the environment, is the setting. Above the story, the combat, everything else, the environments are really incredible. Similar to Red Dead Redemption 2, there's a sense that every area you go into was handmade and it's incredibly unique. I'm starting to see a few places that seem kind of repeated where you can get away with that, like when you're approaching different enemy layers and buildings and stuff. But everywhere you go, outside, the cars, the NPCs, I just spend a lot of time slowly walking around, taking it all in, soaking it in. There's so many times I'm playing this game where I think this would be great in VR, and I see why they went with the first person aspect, because there's a lot of times where characters are really in your face. I remember a moment being at a bar and like the proximity of the bartender to you and the drinks and people coming at you, and it's like an obnoxious and in your face world, and I think being in first person really works with that. It's strange because all 3 Witcher games are third person and you spend so much time and you have such an ability to customize your character. It's strange that you rarely see them in third person, not even in cutscenes or anything. But I think the first person really works, and again, it really helps with the environments. So sometimes the story can be a bit shaky, the combat can feel a little iffy while that's getting better, although I think the story is also improving. Like I said, there's a big moment where characters ask you to betray somebody, and I'm not sure, I can't tell if you're making a real choice or if it's still going to lure you down this way anyways, but I did feel like I was making choices in the conversation. Whether they're going to be game impacting, I know that there's limits when you make a game of this detail that costs this much to render everything and to voice and act out all this dialogue. You can only have so much difference because they have to basically create 2 or 3 different versions to handle all the people's choices, and there's going to be all these choices people aren't going to see, and that works in a really like text heavy game that only has a much smaller team. So there are going to be limitations with how much it can actually branch off. I got to the point where you use the really interesting mechanic. I haven't played Return of the Obra Dinn, but I'm from what I've seen from reviews, I feel like it's very, very similar. You're able to see a situation, in this case through the character's eyes that was there in the situation where they've recorded the memories, and you can also branch out and kind of look around a 3D camera. You can analyze audio things, you can look for like thermal heat vision clues, and using the fast forward and rewind and then looking for clues, staying in proximity to the character that was recorded, I think is a really genius idea for how to do investigation, detective work. Overall, I started off, I was a bit shaky with it, but now that the story's growing, we're meeting more of the characters, I'm getting more into the combat, I'm feeling like some exciting things are coming. I'm really excited to hop back in and play some more today, and I think it's going to be pretty good. I don't think it could ever match up with the hype, but it's not a game's job to match up with the hype. It's just about being a good game, and I think so far it's been above average fun. 10 out of 10 for the visual experience, and I'm really interested and excited to keep playing, and I don't feel like I wasted my money, and I think like it's quite an achievement. What do you think?
Couple of things you need to know first. Severe penalties for any unauthorized recording. No drugs, no groping.
Someone catch your eye? You do not grab them.